Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to #Haunted. I'm Blaine Duncan with Paramerica. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode as we talk about all things spooky and strange. On today's episode, we're heading down to Adams, Tennessee to check out one of the most haunted locations in the entire U.S. A place so haunted that it's actually believed to have been responsible for the death of an American citizen. That's right, I'm talking about the Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee. And if you like the content that we provide or you like the video, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe and the bell for notifications, and give us a comment below. Let us know what you think of our videos. All right, let's get spooky. The legend of the Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee is one of the most famous U.S. hauntings of all time, having spawned several books and even a major motion picture starring Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek. The tale has even been called by some paranormal investigators and parapsychologists as America's greatest ghost story. The legend of the Bell Witch began over 200 years ago in the area that was called Red River, Tennessee, now known as Adams. The story begins in 1804 when John Bell moved himself and his family from North Carolina to Red River, Tennessee, where they settled on a 300-acre piece of farmland. It was the 1800s, so the Bell family planned to do what most people in the 1800s did. They planned to raise a family, raise some animals, and live their lives as faithful members of the community. For 13 years, the family lived completely at peace on the property, but in 1817, strange occurrences began to happen around the Bell family. The haunting really began with strange noises being heard on the walls, tapping noises, banging noises, things like that. Very common occurrences in haunting stories. The Bells also reported hearing the sounds of chains dragging across the floor and heavy footsteps throughout the family's home. But then, things really got strange. When an animal that the family described as a half-wolf, half-rabbit began scaring the bejesus out of the Bell family children as they played around the family farm. "Don't pet that, kids. That's not the Easter Bunny." On one occasion, John Bell even fired his rifle at the animal where it simply disappeared and vanished into the woods. That night, loud banging began to be heard on the walls of the Bell family home. At night, the children reported their blankets being ripped from their beds. Several family members began experiencing strange scratches and bruising, and the Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy, actually claimed to have been physically attacked by an unseen force. Betsy also claimed that she was being kept awake at night by the sound of rats chewing on her bed, but upon inspection, nothing was ever found. Deciding that he had had simply enough of the shenanigans, John Bell went to family and friends and neighbors and began to ask them to come over to see if they would investigate to find out what was actually occurring. After some digging, the family finally determined that the spirit that was haunting them was that of their former neighbor, Kate Batts, who was also believed to be a local witch. Now, John Bell had actually had several run-ins with Kate Batts while she was still living, and supposedly rumor had it that things did not go well. The spirit believed to be that of Kate Batts was often heard screaming and yelling at all hours of the day and night. This was documented by family and friends of the Bells who would stay at the property overnight to see if they too could experience paranormal activity. The haunting continued for several more years, progressively getting worse until soon-to-be President Andrew Jackson, who was a general of the U.S. military at the time, brought him and his men to the property to see if they too could experience these paranormal activities. Not long after General Jackson's arrival, things began to happen to Jackson and his men. The soldiers claimed that at night they heard the sound of whispering and voices, and even equipment and property would begin to vanish and reappear in other spots throughout the property, only broken, damaged, or destroyed. Jackson and his men became so spooked by what was going on, they eventually packed up their belongings and fled into the night, never returning to the Bell family property. From 1817 to 1820, the malevolent spirit of Kate Batts was often heard mocking John Bell, claiming that she was going to be responsible for his death. The witch was even heard at times whispering into the children's ear, telling them that she was going to kill their father. Strangely enough, by the summer of 1820, John Bell's health began to gradually deteriorate. He began having seizures and involuntary facial movements, And when this happened, the witch was supposedly heard laughing and cackling and mocking John Bell during these seizures. On December 20th, 1820, just 3 years after the haunting began, the Bell Witch made good on her promise, and John Bell died in his sleep after slipping into a coma. The story goes that after John's death, a vial of black liquid was found in the cabinets, and that John Bell Jr. inspected it and gave 2 drops to the family cat, where it immediately died. Upon finding the vial, a voice was supposedly heard throughout the Bell family home that said, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night," which fixed him. After seeing the cat dead, John Bell Jr. immediately threw the vial into the fire, where it supposedly exploded into a blue flame and rose up the chimney, where it was never seen again. Over the next few weeks, the haunting activity began to slow down, and the Bell family eventually returned back to normal. The last thing the witch said before leaving the Bell family property was that she was to return in 8 years to pay a visit to the family. Like clockwork, in 1828, the witch returned, this time focusing her efforts on John Bell Jr. and his growing family. For 3 weeks, the Bell Witch tormented John Bell Jr. and his family, where she even made predictions about things that would be coming. One of those predictions was actually that of the Civil War. To this day, there's still supposedly strange occurrences that are happening on and around the Bell family farm. The sounds of an old woman laughing and cackling can often be heard coming from the caves that are not far from where the old family farm once stood. Strange flickering lights and orbs are often seen and photographed around the area. Shadow figures are said to move about in the nearby woods, and many EVPs are captured by paranormal investigators looking to make contact with the Bell Witch. The land where the family farm once stood has been divided up over the last 200 years, but is now considered private property. However, you can visit an old cabin that was supposedly built out of the old Bell home, or you can visit the caves that are not far from the property. If you're feeling brave enough and you want to go do your own paranormal investigation of the area and see if you can make contact with the Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee, you can do so. Just visit www.bellwitchcave.com for more information, where you can look up tours and events happening in the area. So to recap, let's take a look one more time at the Bell Witch haunting. We have strange sounds and banging that were said to be occurring inside the home, strange animal sightings that were seen around the property, physical attacks on the family, objects that seem to move around on their own, disembodied voices, land that was supposedly cursed by a witch, and finally, the only documented case in U.S. history where paranormal occurrences actually took the life of a human being. Without question, I'd say this place is definitely #haunted. So there you have it, the very haunted history of the Bell Witch of Adams, Tennessee. If you like the content that you saw today, please make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment below if there is an area that you'd like for us to cover next. And if you like the series #haunted, please make sure you check out the other 2 videos that we've put out so far on Waverly Hills and Bobby Mackey's Music World. And of course, as always, if you want to support the channel, please check out www.paramericashop.com, where you can get this shirt or any other shirts that I wear on the show. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of #haunted. I'm Blaine Duncan with Paramerica. Stay spooky, my friends.